That changes everything. Yes. Before we get into the text, I just remember talking around that there was something I wanted to say. Because we keep using this word compassion, and in the Tibetan system, we use this word in different contexts, and it does not always have the same meaning. If you use it in the context of the four arms or the four boundless, it means the wish to relieve suffering and the causes of suffering. And in that sense, I mean, it's easy to relate to, because that's what compassion means in English, isn't it? More or less. I mean, sometimes people find it difficult to relate with the word, because there is this confusion that arises with pity. And so I was very puzzled in the beginning when I started teaching, especially in Portugal, because before that I already started teaching, but it was always for Buddhists. So when we mean compassion, everybody understood what it meant, and so it was easy. But then when I started talking for people who were not Buddhists, and especially in Portugal, because they have this Christian background, strong Christian background, some people would come to me and say, but compassion is such an ugly feeling, ugly emotion, because you pity the people, and they were obviously confusing compassion with pity. And in pity you have this sense of that you are in a better place, or you're looking from a better position or something. So you say, oh, you're a poor thing, but you actually keep a distance, But in the Buddhist sense, compassion is something, it's not like that. You don't consider yourself to be different or better, or even just momentarily in the better situation. Because true compassion in Buddhism comes from this realization that we are all samsaric beings. We're all in a difficult situation. So it's like looking at someone. I sometimes use this example, and I think you immediately will be able to feel what I mean, is if you go to a hospital to visit a friend of yours who has a very death disease, very little, I don't know how you say this, yeah. Not terminal, but an infectious disease, which is mortal, gives death,
Yeah.
How do you say
Fatal.
that?
Fatal? No? Terminal.
You can say life-threatening.
Life-threatening, yeah. Infectious disease. Even if it's a very close relation of yours, you will go there with some sort of fear, isn't it? You put a mask and, you approach him in a very cautious way because you might be infected.
It's Ebola, isn't it?
Yeah. For instance. But then if you go and visit a friend who has this same infectious disease, but you are also contaminated, so you won't be afraid of, because there's nothing else that can happen to you. You're already the same, you are infected with the same disease. So you will approach him with just open heart and no fear. So I think the difference between compassion and pity is that compassion has no fear, and pity is it's compassion with fear, in a sense. It's empathy with fear. And so from the Buddhist point of view, once you understand that we are all infected by the same disease, which is duality and, ego clinging and all this stuff. So there is no place, no room for pitying anyone because you are in a better position. You know that we are actually the same. We're infected with the same cause of suffering, fundamental cause of suffering. So there is room for compassion, but no room for pity, because you're no different. No. You may be in a slightly better position right now, but there's no guarantee about next moment or next day or whatever. So it's different. Then there is another thing, that we use the word compassion as a general word for this basic goodness of ours, that is our nature. Sometimes we say, and you find in the teachings, that the nature of our mind is emptiness, or this space, emptiness but the feeling of that emptiness is compassion. What they say, compassion. But if you go to the root of that word, you find two things. If you say it in the like the honorific form, which is only employed to great teachers or deities, we are talking about the perfect compassion. You find two words. You find tuk, je, and tuk means heart, and je means sort of noble or lord or something like this. So if you get close to the meaning, we should be translating compassion as noble heart or noble-heartedness or something like this, which I think for me helped me a lot to get closer to what it means, because it's much more encompassing. You cannot really relate to feel compassion for someone who is being happy, isn't it? Because compassion for us means feeling sorry for someone who is feeling bad. But if you see someone very happy, then there is no room for compassion in that case. Whereas if you think about noble heart, then there is room for rejoicing, for instance. That's why when you see love, joy, compassion and equanimity, you can sort of, that all together you have noble heart. So very often Chenrezig is called the noble one, because he is sort of embodying this quality of nobility in which there is always a warm feeling, whatever the situation is. It can be love, it can be compassion, it can be joy, and anywhere you feel you don't feel that much difference, or you don't have two measures, one for the friends and one for the others. You have the same. That's the mala. Everyone is a bead, and your feeling is like the thread. It goes through every bead in the same way, with no difference, with no distance, with no sort of two different concepts. So maybe I think when we see Chenrezig, I think perhaps thinking about noble heart will make much more sense than just compassion. Because now I think I made it clear enough, but I mean, when you speak of compassion, you're talking about just one of the aspects of this noble heart feeling or being, and it's the one that wants to relieve beings from suffering and the causes of suffering. But then if you take it as a whole, and you include joy and equanimity and love and everything, then it's something larger, and noble heart is something we easily connect to. So, yes?
Can I just check? Sorry. You know when you said that recognizing that all beings are suffering, recognizing others suffering, and that I think you said we're all infected with the same disease, yeah?
That's dukkha.
Yeah. So, but say if you're talking in the West, yeah, and maybe you're talking to some people who are Buddhist, some people who are not Buddhist, yeah? So at that point, when you're saying, this person's suffering and you're suffering, to recognize your sameness, this connectedness that you have with this. If you're not a Buddhist, do you think there's a risk that at that point you could get quite not depressed exactly, but how would you talk if someone went, well, God, he's suffering, I'm suffering, this is all just a load? it could turn you very off. Do you know, it could be nihilistic, the response. Have you encountered
Yeah,
that?
if it comes from the head, yes. If it comes from the heart, I think people recognize. How can I say? We could easily also say we're just human beings, we're all human beings. And so from that point of view, suffering is something that we all know, even if we are not exactly suffering in this moment, but we have been suffering in the past, and I'm sure we all, even we expect not to, but we know that probably we'll be suffering in the future. So this is something that we can all connect. I never found that, maybe depressing. I never thought about people could feel depressed by feeling this way.
I think because without a Buddhist context, at that point you could go, right, great, I'm just going to get pissed and go on holiday for the rest of my life then, because it's all suffering. Do you know what I mean? You could go down that kind of pathway, I suppose.
Maybe.
Because from a Buddhist point of view, we're looking to make that understanding give us a preciousness of human life. But I have known people take it. In that realization, they go the other way.
Yeah. Yes, that might be possible.
I don't know, it just occurred to me as you were speaking about it.
I'll think about
Okay,
it. I never had that. Never happened to me, anyone saying something like that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not always talking to Buddhists, quite often talking to people who are just, But, maybe. I'm thinking, you are...
Do you mean so if you had the idea that I'm suffering and everyone's suffering, it's just a whole big suffering mess, and oh my God, I'm overwhelmed by it? Is that
not that I'm overwhelmed by it, but therefore, without a Buddhist notion, maybe rebirth, right?
Yeah.
If you present that argument to somebody without a notion of rebirth, or karmic consequence, say, then you might go, life's, there's all kinds of phrases in English involving swear words which describe this response to the reality of life, right? And then you move to Tenerife and you take advantage of 50p of a pint beer or
fall
whatever.
into hedonism because it's all
because it makes you actually feel without a Buddhist context, in a Western culture, it's that weird. I don't know. It's just interesting to see different responses to this idea, because we, as Buddhists, obviously we have various conceptual frameworks here to hang on to when we're told this. But if you don't have that conceptual framework, then
so is this in relation to you wanting to help them?
Sorry,
is this in relation to you wanting to help ease their
how to be skillful at that point?
With that person that's
how to be skillful at that point is quite difficult. It can be difficult, I think.
I was thinking perhaps you're unifying people rather than unifying them in suffering, because the moment it's you out there, it's us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Rather than it sounds like a person could potentially go down the route of the examples of suffering, and that could overwhelm, or what's the point? But if we stayed with this something that unites us, that there's just those difficulties in life, and I just wondered maybe rather than bringing the person away from the focus of the suffering and the overwhelmingness of suffering, but to bring us into the sense that we're all together. I wondered, I don't know, in those examples where you've described where people can feel.
Yeah, but I guess it's so I didn't mean to sidetrack like this, but I guess it's a very human condition to reach a point of realization of suffering. At that point, many people encounter difficult circumstances in their life, and they're often turning points for people, aren't they?
That's a renunciation.
But they can go either way, I think.
Well, I think
Do you not think? Am I saying something really stupid?
No.
Okay. So it's just
definitely.
Yeah, it's really
I
good.
think in a way, so we've been running from one pleasure into another for years or centuries, depending how you see that. And I think at the point you need to come to your personal realization that running to another pleasure then to another pleasure doesn't really help. So going to Tenerife, you go there, I think it's fine for most people, but if you're there, you find, now I need to go to Hawaii, and then you're not happy. At some point you need to say, maybe I need to stop or think differently. But I think it's natural initially just to run. That's what we've been doing.
They take the problem with them to Tenerife.
Yeah, of course. We all know that.
But some people might not.
Some people might not, and it's just trying to
some point
think.
must be your personal experience. You say, oh, I'm Tenerife, I'm happy, not really. I'm going to another place, happy, not really. At some point you need to say, maybe I'm not.
Yeah, I think at a certain stage, you know, if someone cannot connect with that, but I will stop coming to your group, and that's it. Then and at some level, one has to face it that one cannot change anything if people are not, like Michele is saying, if they have not reached that conclusion themselves, and they're at the point of starting to look for something beyond just the next pleasure or, you know, the next intellectual challenge or something like this, then which is sometimes the reason why people come to a Buddhist gathering or something, is just, let's see, you know, and but in the more intellectual or driven by curiosity perhaps or something, you know, but not really willing to do anything within themselves, you know. It's difficult to do. But you reach that point through experience, like Michele was saying. At some point you say, okay, I have enough of trying to find something, you know, outwardly. It's not helping. I'm not going anywhere with this, so I have to go and find something else. But if that's not their approach, they will probably stop coming, because you have disappointed them in a certain sense, because they were expecting some miracle solution or something very easy and instantaneous or something like this. That's what I find. But I think what Selma said is also true. You can sort of appeal to this sense of humanity that happens very naturally. Well, for instance, when there is a natural disaster, for instance, you know, and everybody loses their parents or friends or relatives or possessions or whatever, they tend to get together. You know?
It's not depending on being Buddhist or not. It's just the
human nature. Yeah, I think, and it's very natural, and people find support on each other by understanding that everybody has lost something, you know. So I think this sort of empathy works very well when people are confronted with difficult situations, but not just in their mind. Yeah. That's the problem. Because if it's something like depression or something like this, based on my own feelings, then I'm in my small little world. You know, it's difficult to relate with other than coming to a support group or, you know, where you hear that everybody has the same problem. But if it's something, simple or obvious, like a catastrophe or a natural disaster or something that is not just something that you build up in your own small world, then people naturally tend to gather and to support each other, because that's what we naturally do. You see what I mean? I don't know if this helps, but...
I think about it some more, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's using words that people relate to. It's like speaking in the layman way, as opposed to... As I teach in the layman's way, because they need to hear what they can relate to words, English language, whatever their language.
I was reading something in the Chenrezig book by Rinpoche, and it was about kind of Buddha nature and its basic goodness. And he was saying, we survive because of it. There's so much struggling and difficulty and suffering in life, and we're all aware of that, but yet we carry on. It's like a flash of that insight of what our basic goodness is. And that's how, I think you were saying this is maybe his opinion, but that's we still survive. And why are we doing that? How is it happening with all this kind of adversity? Because there's that, somewhere we're in touch with that. And I thought that was quite nice.
Yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah.
Really.
I was just thinking, you as a teacher, and you were talking about we can appeal to when you're talking to other people. in relation to something. But transformation, that's not the teacher or anybody, any other person's role or responsibility, and that we need to be mindful that we don't get caught in.
You can become a little bit of a catalyst for accelerating this transformation once you become a sort of example because of your presence, not necessarily because you're doing or what you're teaching even, but just because it radiates through you. And then that can sort of awaken something in us that it's there but a little bit dormant. Many times when I'm speaking, everybody's it's facing me, so I can watch the faces. And even in a very ordinary context, I can see people going like this, because everything I'm saying makes sense for them. But sometimes the feedback is, you didn't really say anything new to me. But it's like I always felt like this, but I couldn't express it, or I couldn't put it in such a clear way, or something like this. So I think this is what really happens. This sort of maturity is in us. We have been maturing this view for a long time through experiences, successive experience, but we haven't yet. We aren't yet totally aware of how mature we have become until someone puts it into words, and you suddenly realize there's a whole system out there. There's lots of people thinking like me. Wow, how wonderful, And this is it's a very happy moment, because we are not anymore alone or thinking by ourselves. We just realize there's a whole system out there which just mirrors what we have been, maturing inside. But until we have this sort of maturity and these experiences have brought us to that point, then we probably stay in our head. It won't make sense for us. I think the important part is when it makes sense for us, and that's what shows that we are in the right point. But of course, no one can make this transformation for us.
Which was
We can sort of express it and help people realizing that they already have done it. You see what I mean? But not really do it for them. It's just suffering is a very important part of it, because it's through suffering most of the time. Not only, but suffering is what challenges us. So if everything goes well, we just go around and believe that samsara is a nice place, and and then we go to nice places where everybody suffers as much as in the other ones. I was invited by a Buddhist group to Tahiti, and you have all these landscapes that normally are part of the wallpaper of your computer, coconut trees and beautiful turquoise waters and magnificent beaches and things like this. And you are there and you say, wow, I'm in paradise. And then someone comes and says, yeah, but I'm so worried because my neighbor has a dog and it keeps barking. And you say, wow, how do you manage to be unhappy in such a wonderful place? But we just pack even if we wanted to change our country tomorrow, we would pack our things, or perhaps just a backpack. But once we get there, we take the things out and we take all our problems and we start building our new environment from our problems, and then it will be there the same way. Perhaps we will be a bit excited in the first weeks. I say, wow, I live in such a wonderful place now and everything. But then slowly it would just become exactly the same thing as before, with a little bit more sun and a little.
It's interesting to do it around the other way, because I grew up in Australia, and a really beautiful place, and I'm here now, and people say to me, what are you doing here? I'm like, but what, you know, if I wanted to go there, I would go back there. But you've got to be happy where you're happy. You know, there's still beautiful things. England's lovely. Rains here. You know.
Yeah, I know.
But in Portugal, Ringo spoke last time about consultations, and he goes to he sees people in California and in the very
Wonderful,
say,
yeah.
a certain area of California, as a guest, and he says he doesn't say much in the consultation, but like they're coming with the same problems, and he says, my suggestion is you come to India for 4 weeks, and at the end of 4 weeks, come to me for a consultation. Now you see, there's a tool. Now it's up to you to work with it and really see how unfortunate you may or may not be.
Yeah. He then always says people come after 4 weeks and they're now with a big smile, and he says, how did your travel went? Oh, it was wonderful, I'm so happy to be back, you know. I said, and then everything went well. No, I got sick, I got diarrhea and all this stuff, but it was still so wonderful because when they come back, you know, they have realized how lucky and how fortunate they are. Then of course it sort of wears off and one gets caught in his own problems again, you know. That's why sometimes you have to, from time to time, you know, go somewhere where you can see how fortunate you are. Yeah. Well, okay, coming back to Chenrezig, I think we might now be sort of ready to go through the text. Cesare has done this beautifully. So in the third, oh, you don't have. There's lots of them here. Anyway. There's one more, thanks. Oh, you had an extra one. Yeah.
There's loads more than people here. Glasses.
Yeah, I have this, but it's a bit more difficult because I need both hands to put them on and off, you know. So I have another version, more conventional, that are easier to take up or put on and off with just one hand. Yeah, it's an interesting system. It goes like this.
I got mine from Casa.
Yeah.
I don't wear much.
Yeah, it's practical, but not in London because most people run around with a cup of tea, so they don't have both ends to. This is something you don't see in Portugal. Huh? We are very.
They enjoy it. They go and sit down and enjoy it.
Yeah. Here everybody runs around with food and drink, and you know they don't have time to eat. I mean, here perhaps not. I hope for you, but in London it's really terrible.
They even get on the plane carrying their coffee, and I feel like saying, "They'll give you some on the plane." Someone poured tea over me as they got on the plane.
Yeah. Oh, yesterday I discovered that. You know this company Pret à Manger?
Yeah, very well.
They're very good.
Yeah.
They have a little spoon to put on your cup so that it blocks the little hole through which you drink and so you don't spill it. Wow, it's really sophisticated. It's getting really. Okay, so. It's called, the title of this text, which has been written by the great Siddha Tangtong Gyalpo. As you can see it in the 5th page at the end. Tangtong Gyalpo was a Tibetan teacher who was very unusual, not very conventional, let's say. He lived, I think, in the 12th century? Yeah, 12th century. And it was a great teacher, really someone very enlightened, as you can say. And it was quite unusual. He was very closely related with Bhutan also. He was sort of an engineer or something like this. He was not only just a spiritual teacher, he was also the one who first created the suspended bridges with iron chains. Before it was just ropes, But he created he had this idea of replacing the ropes by iron chains. And in Bhutan, you can still find a piece of one iron chain coming from that time. The bridge is not there anymore. It has been taken away by bad weather or something. But in the entrance of one of the Bhutanese most famous museums, you can see a piece of that. And when you see him represented, he is like me, but with even a bigger belly. He's sitting on the cushion and their skin, and he has in one hand he has a piece of chain, just to remind ourselves that it has other meanings, but also to remind ourselves of it. And he used also to write theater plays. And he would go around with these disciples and do representations of his play. So it was a bit unusual as a teacher, but it was also someone extremely realized. And he wrote this sadhana, which is a very simple one. I hope you will be happy to relate with it. So it starts with a verse of refuge that you already chant in the beginning. In the Supreme Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until attaining enlightenment. Which is prayers in Buddhism are very much reminders. Sometimes people ask me, if Buddhism hasn't a God, so to whom are you praying? Yeah. So when you say something like this, it's not for someone to hear. You can even recite it silently. It's for you. It's for us. It's for remembering ourselves, of why we are doing this. So, because in the olden days and as well as now, there are lots of different systems of meditation. But the reason why we recite refuge in the beginning is just for us to understand why are we going to meditate. It's not to be reborn in some paradise somewhere in Tahiti or in the Trinidad or somewhere like this. But it's in order for us to be able to go beyond samsara, and not only for ourselves but for others. So the power of this intention, this altruistic intention, is very strong. Because things that we wouldn't do for ourselves, we do for others easily and happily. When it perhaps not in the day-to-day life where you have more like people around, but in extreme situations, we will be able to put on some more effort if we feel like we are responsible for someone. And there is this story that I always like to tell. Someone told me once, I don't know exactly the context, even if I don't even know if it's a true story, but it sounds very true in a sense. So this was this group of refugees who were running from the place where they lived because there was some war or something like that. And they had a timing to get out of the country before the borders were closed or something like this. And it was all young people, very fit, and they could, they were walking, and they could do like a certain amount of kilometers or miles a day in order to be able to get to the border on the right time. And at some point, they were crossing a village, and two people came to them, knowing that they were running, and asked if they could join the group. But the two people were a young woman with a baby and an older man and both of them they thought they would both have difficulty keeping the pace, So they said, okay, we have to gather and between ourselves decide if we are going to accept you in the group or not. So they talked a bit, but then they said, we cannot leave them behind. Okay, you come with us, but there's a condition. The conditions are that the young woman, we will take the baby in turns. And about you, and turning to the older man, he said, if you can't walk anymore, we will leave you behind, because then you will put all of us into risk. So they agreed. They said, okay, we agree, we go with you. So they started, and for a few days everything went well, everybody could keep the pace and it was okay. After a while, the old man was he couldn't do it anymore, and at one of the stops on one morning or something, he just said, okay, now we'll have to make a decision. I cannot keep the pace with you, so you just leave me behind and go on. But then, after a while, it's easy to decide that once you don't know the people. But then you create bonds, and it's not so easy. So they couldn't really put themselves into letting the old man behind. So there was a sort of hesitation. And at that moment, the young woman had a brilliant idea. She took the baby, gave to the old man, and said, no, you can't stay, because now it's your turn to take the baby with you, to carry the baby. So, surprisingly, the old man got up and he continued, and they reached the border in time. I think when we feel like we are entrusted with the responsibility of someone else, there is from somewhere that normally is not available in our day-to-day life, comes a strength that you didn't even know you had, and that keeps you going. So whenever we find that there is nothing else we can do, we wouldn't do it for ourselves, but for others. We're still capable of doing it. So that's the power of altruistic intention, But you can see it even in very simple things. If we are alone, we'll eat a sandwich, but we'll be happily staying in the kitchen for hours if we want to cook a meal for someone else, isn't it? So even in simple things, thinking of others gives us an extra strength. So when we recite this, we should take advantage of having such a text, and instead of just repeating it as something that is written there, just sort of at that moment think of these sort of examples and see that I take refuge until attaining enlightenment, and then through the merit of my generosity and other virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So it's like the old man, from the start. We are already taking responsibility for others. So what we are doing is not just us getting to the border in time, it's just us getting to the border in time with everybody else, or for everybody else, This is very, very, very important. So that's why we repeat 3 times. Tibetans are very practical. They know first time we will be thinking about something else, and second time we will be thinking, I should think about what I'm saying. So by the third time, we will probably be thinking what we are saying. So that's the reason why we sometimes repeat 3 times, They're very, very wise and practical. Then here it's not really clearly stated, but often in these texts, we start by some phrase or sentence or word that says, in the space in front of me, in this case it's above my head, but there is always mention of space. And there are usually sentences like, in the space in front of me, for instance. and you wonder why in the hell you have to say in the space, because in front of me cannot be anywhere else than in the space, right? But the reason why is because it is meant to bring about this awareness that it has to be something spacious. Like if you have some experience in meditation and you have been able to practice a little bit of Shine, you will probably quite quickly, even if it's only in flittering moments, but quite quickly have this feeling of spaciousness. You know, when you switch from thinking to awareness, it's immediately like opening a big window. You know, you're in a very small place. You know, it's something very small, and there's no air. That's thinking, and then suddenly you switch to being aware, and that's something much more vast. And it's very important, and I think in the beginning the Tibetan teachers were not as aware as they are now, that we don't quite function as Tibetans. And because all of this is for us is very new, we have this tendency to transform visualization into a new form of thought. Instead of, words, we create images, but they are equally creations of our mind. I don't know if you understand what I mean, because you try to intellectually design Chenrezig in front of you, and you also puzzled because you don't know how many hands he has anymore, and how many bracelets, and how many things, and how many stones he has in his crown, and so it all becomes thought. You get entangled in this, and you sort of lose the idea and the benefit. So this idea of space is very important, because all of it has to be done from that spacious place. So first of all, I think after refuge, you should take some moments, perhaps, or even before refuge, but let's say after refuge, you should take some moments to create within yourself this sense of spaciousness. Sometimes there is some sentence or other, let's say, in the paradise of Chenrezig, or in this beautiful garden, or something like this, just to create a sort of image with which you can relate, and will create this openness. Okay, so you can use it whatever. You can imagine that you are yourself in the top of a mountain, or in the beautiful beach, and everything is very open and luminous, or it is good not to imagine yourself in an actual place that you know, because then you have all these references. Oh yes, I went to, I don't know, Canary Islands last year, it was so nice, and then you start, it starts, and it's immediately connected with all sorts of things. This cocktail that I drank, or it was very romantic in candlelight, or anything like this. So this is it's better to avoid that. Just imagine yourself in a beautiful, luminous and spacious space that you don't know. You have never been there. Okay, just something open and spacious. And then you say here that above the crown of my head and all other sentient beings pervading space, so this becomes a little bit more difficult, but even if you don't see them, you just imagine that above your head, and as well as the head of every other sentient being, on the white lotus and the moon is the syllable Ri. Free. It's how you say this? Like in, you have that in English. Many languages don't have them, but here you have.
This one?
Syllable Ri.
Or that one. Which one did I?
I think for the proportions, this one is better, or that one, but this is not so.
quite small.
It's a bit small. Try the other one, that one. Yeah, that's great. So what this means is they call this, sometimes they call the, how do you say this in English? It's sort of the sound or the vibration, which is the essence of this deity. It's the starting point. And it's strange, it's a syllable. But if you go to the Bible, what is this said? In the beginning was the word. Okay. So that's it. The beginning was the word. The sound. So before form, there is sound. And that's what it means, actually. Every deity has a sort of essential seed syllable. Thank you. I was searching for the word in English. Seed syllable, yeah. It's like a seed. It's like the starting point. If you wanted to go deeper into the essence of Chenrezig, you would come to the seed syllable. Cesare had this idea of showing you how to draw the syllable, because I think it does help to remember. You might say, why do I have to remember it in Tibetan? It's easier to write it down in phonetics or anything. You can also, it's possible. But I think it's so much more beautiful like this. It actually and it also has it's not connected with anything that you already know, so it's something also new. So the symbolic aspect is much more present than if you just write it down. So it is quite easy. You easily get acquainted with it.
There's a page here.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, maybe at lunch, if after you've eaten, we'll get some pens. If you feel like drawing it, you can have a go, or take it home, whatever. But that's the idea.
Yeah. I will show you, because it has there is an order.
Okay.
It was mainly because, as you can see, there are, in ancient times, even in our languages, I believe in English also, there was calligraphy, and you wrote with a sort of pen that made some parts of the letters were thicker than others, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the same thing. They write with a sort of flat bamboo, but they don't hold it in the same, it's not stiff like we do. They make it roll like this. So sometimes it's a flat part, and then sometimes, so you start like this, and then you go down, and it comes from thick to thin. Okay, well, you don't have to go that far, but I mean, otherwise, if you have bamboos in the courtyard, then. So on the white lotus and moon is the syllable ri, shri, actually, as they pronounce it in Tibetan, because this H is, how you say?
Silent. Silent?
Yeah. Not silent.
No. It's in the throat.
Yeah. I think Arab has this sort of sound.
Or maybe Welsh.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
No, I might,
And from it appears the noble and supreme Chenrezig. So first of all, you see the lotus and the moon disk on the top of it, like here, lotus and moon disk, and then the syllable Hri, sorry. And then from it appears Chenrezig. From the syllable appears Chenrezig. So it will also be seated on a white lotus and a moon disk, but the syllable transforms into Chenrezig. You might wonder why you have to do all this. But in the different sadhanas and according to different tantras, the deities appear in different ways. It is supposed to be meant for purifying all possibilities of rebirth. So according to the Tibetan teachings, because we are not always reborn as human beings, there are other types of birth, like from an egg, or what they say miraculously, like you're born in the hell realms, for instance. I think they're not that much into sex, so we appear there like fully formed when we are reborn in such places. But anyway, the different ways the deity appears, from a syllable or just spontaneously or anything, is just meant to go into our sort of software program and rewrite it so that everything, in the very, very, very deep and unconscious level changes our very subtle habitual tendencies. This all is for some of you is something very, very new, and I'm not expecting you to believe or even, memorize or even believe all these things, but so that the reason why all these things appear. So, Chenrezig comes from the syllable Ri. He is brilliant white and radiates the 5 lights. So what this means is his complexion is white, but not as in the image, but he radiates the 5 lights. 5 lights here, we're talking about the 5 basic colors: white, red, blue, green, and yellow. Right? This is the 5 basic lights, which connect to other things like the 5 wisdoms and things like this, but we won't go into that detail. Just imagine that from Chenrezig, who is crystal white and very bright, radiates this all 5 lights all around him like rays of color. Now with thanks to what's his name? The guy of all special effects in American movies. Spielberg, yeah. All this became much easier. These sort of exercises of seeing rays of lights and things like this, thanks to Spielberg, it appeals to our imagination. And is handsome and smiling. He looks on with eyes of compassion. That's, as I told you, Chenrezig means exactly, yes, looking on with eyes of compassion. He is also handsome and smiling. So his the face is very, very attractive. Not in a worldly way, but attractive because it's beautiful. It reflects all this kindness. Is always very sweet, also, and very beautiful, harmonious. Everything is very harmonious. It's well chosen because he is really very harmonious, almost a little bit feminine. That's probably why in the Japanese and Chinese tradition they change the sex of Chenrezig and make it a deity, a feminine deity. He has four hands. The first are joined in Anjali, means like folding, the 2 first. And then the lower 2 hold a crystal mala and a white lotus. Adorned with ornaments of silk and jewels, he wears an upper garment of deer skin. Yeah, we've talked about that. Then it says, Amitabha crowns his head, which is not seen here in this representation. Amitabha is the Buddha of infinite light. He is all red. It's like a Buddha, like the image of Buddha, except his hands are in meditation posture, and he is red in color. He is above his head, like if it was his teacher, or is even another they usually say it's from the same family, but let's not go into that. His 2 feet are in the Vajra posture, that means cross legs, but with the, not like we usually do, but in a more difficult position. And his back rests against a stainless moon. He is the embodiment of all objects of refuge. So, this is normally the description of what we are supposed to visualize. His back is against a full disk of moon, a moon disk. So he is irradiating 5 colored lights, but he is leaning against a full moon disk. And he is embodying, he is the embodiment of all objects of refuge. This means that you consider or you understand that what you're visualizing or what you have in front of you is not just, it is like the essence of all the teachers, of all the deities, of all the beings in one sense, because he represents the Buddha nature actually. So even if he has this form, and even if he is mainly represents compassion, he is actually the representation or the essence of the Buddha nature of all the beings, especially, of course, the teachers, enlightened teachers, and bodhisattvas and Buddhas and so on. So it's something very broad. It's like the essence of Buddhahood. That's what it meant. It is meant. So I think we may stop here, because otherwise I'll start something else, and then and it's 1:00, and then we continue. Yeah, we can continue in the afternoon. And thank you for being so patient.
Should you say when you're starting again so people know?
Oh yeah, I don't
How
know.
long do you reckon? An hour?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit short if some people go, I don't know. You tell me.
How long do you want for a break? Was it?
It was normally an hour.
About an hour. We've got food here, some more food to share, but
We need things. I've got the shops over the road.
let's play it by ear and see how it goes. About roughly an hour, should we say?
Yeah,
An hour.
that's okay.
People want more Chenrezig.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if there's a flip chart. Maybe if I could find one, that you could show
That
us.
could draw, yeah.
I'll ask Mark.
Yeah, that would be good.
They might have, yeah. A big sheet of paper.
And we've got puppies coming.
Oh!
Yeah, schnauzers are coming.
Oh!
Can we get one each?
Oh,
No,
nice.
don't get one each. It's not part of the day. If you leave with the puppy feeling in your heart, well,
But not the puppy.
My